And we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to another Tit Talk live panel discussion here on the Boobies and Noobies YouTube channel. If you're listening to the playback later as a podcast episode, thanks for tuning in. I am joined today by these three lovely ladies. I don't know where they are in the boxes on everybody else's screen, but I'm so excited to chat with them about alpha heroes, something that I think we associate with the romance novel genre quite often. And we're specifically going to be talking about how far they've come, how far they've evolved, have they evolved enough, and where the future of the alpha hero might be. So first things first, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Kelly Reynolds. I host the Boobies and Noobies podcast. I also just published my second book, a holiday novella called Venice Actually. So if you're in the market for some steamy holiday romance, even though it's not Halloween yet, check that out. And I'm going to pass the mic over to EF. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. First, I appreciate this because I feel like I'm in Hollywood Squares right now. Like that's literally the sense that I get. I'm EF Dodd. I'm a contemporary romance writer. My latest book, Almost Perfect, will come out on November 1st. It is also a little holiday themed. And so I hope you guys will go check that out.
And I have to say, on a personal note, we are reading EF's holiday romance as part of the 12 Days of Boobsmas. So you will hear us talking about it. And she's also graciously donated a copy of her book for one of our Boobsmas giveaways. So you'll be hearing EF Dodd on the Boobies and Noobies channel a lot in the near future.
I love it.
Over to Jess.
Hey guys, I'm Jess Bryant, and I am a steamy romance writer. I write what I like to read, so it is kind of all over the place. I have male, female, and male romances, and I also write across contemporary romance, small town romance, paranormal romance, just kind of whatever the mood strikes, and they're all available on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited.
And I might be a little biased, but I think Jess's Facebook group is actually one of my favorite book Facebook groups to be a part of.
What is it?
Oh, thank you. It's Jess Bryant's Bibliophiles.
Okay, I'm going to join.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. She posts a lot of fun discussions. It's really great.
It's my fun place, and I am always there, and it's like a safe spot. I love it. The girls are great.
Yeah.
Wow,
great.
sold.
And now Erin's going to join it. Wonderful. Erin, over to you.
I need safe spaces on the internet like everyone else. So yeah, my name is Erin La Rosa. I am the author of For Butter or Worse and the upcoming Plot Twist, which are both part of a Hollywood romance series. It's contemporary romance. It is open door, very spicy. And I'm branching into something called speculative romance, which is sort of like a little bit of magical realism. So that'll be my third book. I'm very excited about it. But if you love cinnamon roll heroes and open door romance and funny scenes with animals, that's like usually my book.
Check. And Erin has been a guest on Boobies and Noobies before. We recorded a podcast episode together when For Butter or Worse was coming out, and we bonded over our shared love of food in Los Angeles because both of our books take place in Los Angeles, and Erin and I actually have included and alluded to several real spots in Los Angeles in our books.
Let me tell you, did I tell you this, Kelly, last time that one of the restaurants I included, this pasta place called 𝑨𝒍𝒎𝒐𝒕, like found out that they were in the book and then they gave me free dinner.
I love
so this
it.
is another benefit of including local places, because I was like, yes, I will take your free pasta. No problem.
That's awesome.
Especially pasta. Like pasta
That's
is
awesome.
always.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh gosh. Well, I'm so excited to have the three of you here. And I will tell everybody, just for your own information, I did mention it when I posted about the event, but this idea specifically came from EF, who was the winner on an auction item I had put up for the Romance for Reproductive Justice auction earlier this year. We talked about different ideas that she might want to do, and she suggested alpha heroes and having a conversation about how they, have influenced the romance genre, how they've evolved, how they maybe have not evolved so much, and just a general conversation about it for Tit Talk. I thought it was a great idea. I think it's definitely keeping in line with a lot of the things we do talk about on Boobies and Noobies. So I am super excited to talk about this. And I think the first thing I'd love for all of us to kind of put our heads together and figure out is, what is it that we consider an alpha hero in romance? Like, what are some of the traits and characteristics we associate with alpha heroes in romance? And I'm just going to throw that out into the ether and let anybody cling to it and go forward.
I told EF I only want her to talk because she has.
Well, I guess since it was my idea, I should probably kick off. And I would just say that for me, for an alpha hero, like the number one trait would just be confidence. And because you can't, in my view, be someone that is considered an alpha by other people if you don't have just that underlying or inner self-confidence in yourself, to believe in yourself as a leader and to just really come across as someone that other people can turn to in times of crisis. So if you're lacking confidence, I don't think there's any way you could be considered an alpha hero.
Very true. Very true. I was gonna lead with that. Sorry.
Confidence is key. Okay, what else?
It's interesting because I hadn't even thought about that, but you're really right. Because I think when I think about alphas, I always think of them as like fairly intimidating guys who don't really connect with our heroine right away. Like usually it's sort of like they are asserting their dominance. Like that's what I kind of think of as alphas, of like they are intimidating in some kind of way to our heroine, in terms of like maybe they get off on the wrong foot, like maybe the alpha is like kind of being a little bit more like macho than cinnamon roll. And so that's kind of how I think of them, or like when I read those heroes, that's what I pick up on first.
Yeah.
Writing.
Oh, go ahead,
writing.
Jess.
Sorry. There's like a delay, I think. Writing paranormal romance, alpha males is a very big part of that, because, wolf shifters, they're generally seen. And the whole role of being like a pack leader is being the alpha. So I generally think of them as, being very self-confident, not afraid to take the lead, take charge, and kind of bossy. I mean, that dominant, bossy, like it's my way and we're doing it my way is really key to me.
Yeah. I think dominant, confident, aggressive at times, which can be both a positive and a negative, I think are a lot of the like similar traits we see for alpha heroes. I do think it's really interesting, EF, that you mentioned for them to be seen as an alpha hero by other people, because that would be something I would wonder about too, is an alpha hero because he thinks he's an alpha hero, or because other people perceive him that way?
Well, yeah. And I think I find that really interesting, because I saw, and I can't remember where I saw this, but it was probably on Instagram, but it was like, if you have to tell people you're an alpha, you're not an alpha. So from my perspective, your thought as a romance hero doesn't really matter, because it's something that's within you and other people see it, and you don't have to bring it up. You just are. And Jess, it's like you said, you are the pack leader. Like people turn to you because
Mhm.
that's who you are. You don't need to remind them of your position.
Mhm.
You are the pack leader because you are the alpha. And it's
Can I
not
ask a
something.
question
Uh-huh.
too? Like, because I
Yeah.
feel like most of the books I read are these like cinnamon roll kind of heroes, but I have read a lot of mafia romance books, which are like a very specific kind of alpha male.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, like, have you guys noticed too? Like, I think when I read those books, usually the men are described as like kind of physically intimidating in terms of like tall, broad,
Size and
like,
stature, for
beefy.
sure. Mhm.
And do they ever have alpha representation in these where the guy is like maybe a slighter build?
An alpha short king? Hell yeah!
Doesn't that sound nice?
The Napoleon
Yeah.
of romance.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you seen that? Like I haven't, but
I haven't ever
God,
seen that.
there is a
Yeah, go
there
ahead,
in
Jess. I'm sorry.
male romance, because I also write, gay romance, male. I do think you tend to see it more there, where they don't have to be the big, muscle, bulky guy to be the dominant one in the relationship.
yeah.
You get to play with that a little bit more in male romance than you do in male female, I believe. And there's one that I love, and I just, like, you literally said it, and I was like, that book, but the title is not in my head right now. It's
Oh,
killing me that I
Jess,
cannot think of what book it is. I'm gonna scroll
let
my
me
phone and
ask you
find
this.
it.
I felt that way about red, white, and royally blue,
Mhm.
with not the British
Mhm.
guy, but the American guy. I felt like the way he was described, he was still obviously described as, very attractive, but he wasn't this big, brawny, burly guy. He was confident in who he was, and he owned being,
Yeah.
5'8" or 5'9" or whatever. I don't know if that's how tall he was
Mhm.
in the book, but that was just how I pictured
Yes.
him, as more of a slighter build.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you don't conform to heteronormative male-female gender roles, things can happen. Yeah, no,
It's
we will get to that.
amazing.
We will get to that momentarily. But I did want to share with you, I just was kind of curious. I was like, I'm not sure. I'm wondering if like there's an actual in terms of how it relates to romance novels, if there's a person credited with like the term of alpha hero, like in the world of romance. Because obviously we apply alpha like beyond the world of romance, but I didn't find a specific source to say like this is like the one all be all definition when it comes to romance, but I did have one from author Doreen Owens Malik, who, and this was quoted in a I forget if it was an interview or a study that they did with Duke University, but she puts it very simply: the alpha hero is a, quote, strong, dominant, aggressive male brought to the point of surrender by a woman. The idea that the hero should be emotionally defeated by the heroine is often an important aspect of alpha male characterization. And I found that really interesting because I think we kind of alluded to it a little bit in our introduction of alpha heroes, but I think a large component of at least what alpha heroes are supposed to be in the world of romance is them being alpha is part of their character growth, that it's a way to show who they are before we introduce this woman that brings out the emotional side of him, the vulnerable side of him. And I don't know, maybe tone down some of those like alpha male, quote unquote, traits, but already there's complications to that because again, that means you're playing specifically into a male-female dynamic, which is not always the case in romance.
Yeah, and for me, the problem that I have is that when I think of someone that is a true alpha personality, I don't like to characterize them as dominant. I think they can be if you take it too far. But to me, just because someone is an alpha doesn't mean that they are necessarily a dominant character. But in my preference as a reader and how I try to write it, I enjoy an alpha guy, and I write male female romance, so that's what I cater to. But I like a guy who is confident enough to appreciate the fact that the woman he likes could also be an alpha. She doesn't have to be the beta. She doesn't have to be the beta to his alpha. She can be just as much of a badass. Sorry for those of you who don't like swearing. Shouldn't read my books if you don't like swearing.
They didn't come to the right panel discussion.
But I think for me, it goes back to that first aspect of an alpha, which is confidence, because this is a man who is secure in himself. And because he is secure in who he is, he can appreciate her for who she is. And so I think, at least in my opinion, some people or some writers or some readers, they blend in this idea of the damaged hero and they paint that with more of the alpha brush. Oh, well, he's emotionally scarred or he's stunted or whatever. Well, again, if you're emotionally scarred, you're probably going to lack a little bit of that confidence because you're not going to be so sure of yourself. So that would be my response to that description of an alpha. But again, just my opinion.
No, that's good. Well, and that's the very reason why I thought the three of you would be great for this panel, because if you write male female romance, Erin, I know you do as well, although you tend to write the more sweet, gooey cinnamon roll type heroes. And then Jess has dabbled in a little bit of everything. And then you throw in the paranormal aspect when there is generally this idea of like alpha in terms of like wolf packs. And you do write some shifter romances. So it adds like this whole new dimension to it. So yeah, we really are approaching this from varying angles of how alpha heroes fit and don't fit into modern day romance novels.
Yeah, I think like my heroes, to your point, like start as alpha potentially, like when you're reading them, and then, it gets slowly revealed they're gooey on the inside. Because I feel like it's really hard for me to write alphas that are pure alpha, and maybe that delves into that. You mentioned the quote from Duke University from the study or whatever, like emotionally defeating was such an interesting way to put it.
I agree.
That the heroine like emotionally defeats them, because it doesn't feel that way to me when you write it, and when you read it, it's more like, they're opening up finally. But
no, they've been defeated. They've
been cornered,
the women beat it out of them.
Yeah.
Beat it out of them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think, it's still a little early, but it's hard to like avoid getting into it. I think what we may have considered an alpha hero 5, even 10 years ago has very much changed because of the way, at least in my opinion, because of the way just the word alpha has been co-opted by red pill culture and toxic masculinity. Because, and this is my thesis, and I'm going to give you my evidence here. So once again,
welcome to Kelly's TED Talk.
This is something I could talk about. So there's not an episode of the podcast that goes by without me bringing up feminism or toxic masculinity or the patriarchy in some way.
Why we love you.
It's a huge part of romance, though.
Absolutely,
it is.
I agree. And so, once again, let me give you author Doreen Owens Malick's simple definition of alpha hero: strong, dominant, aggressive male brought to the point of surrender by a woman. Let me give you the traits of toxic masculinity as coined by Shepard Bliss. The notion that some people's idea of manliness perpetuates domination, aggression, and homophobia. And I do think there's a lot of crossover between what we think of as an alpha man today, even in the world of romance, as well as the things we associate with toxic masculinity. And I mean, we see it if you're on TikTok, if you're on Instagram, if you're on Twitter. We were just talking before we started about how Twitter has kind of like been taken over by some really scary ideas. And a lot of it ties into like incel culture, and a lot of it ties into very, very conservative old ideas of what men are meant to be and what women are meant to be. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people are starting to skew away from alpha heroes and gravitate more towards cinnamon roll, gooey, or even I like cinnadoms. That's what I call the nice like in between.
That's right.
But and that's not just my opinion either, because I have an article from Publishers Weekly that was an interview with one of the senior editors at Atria, who said more readers are asking for cinnamon rolls and golden retrievers. We're seeing a changing view on identity and masculinity and consent in the larger population, and readers are looking for romance novels to reflect what they are seeing in their culture. And I think this is something we also talk about on Boobies and Noobies all the time, that art imitates life, imitates art, imitates life. It's this cycle of what's going on in our world we start to see reflected back in our media, and then vice versa. What we're putting out there in our books and our movies and our shows becomes part of the culture as well. And so I, for one, am excited to see more golden retrievers and cinnamon rolls and cinnadoms in the world, because I think it is a good progressive way to think about femininity and masculinity. But at the same time, I think I would like to see us redefine what it means to be an alpha hero, because just the four of us alone listed traits that don't need to be inherently negative things. I think we're just, sometimes if they go to the extreme, that's when it becomes negative and dangerous sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that honestly,
Yeah,
go ahead, Jess.
Oh, sorry. Jess is on a delay. So
I know. Bless her heart.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. What I was going to say is that I noticed, I mean, I've been reading romance for, 20 years or so, long time. Been writing it for a very long time too now. But when I first really got into, especially like in the indie romance community, he was a jerk. He was, he wasn't just confident, he was arrogant. He was sometimes nasty and just like put her down. And that was considered alpha. And I was like, no, these are just jerks. These aren't alphas. Like, they're
just an asshole.
More recently, he's just an ass. Like, he's not an alpha. He's just an ass. So I think, especially in the last few years, we've started to really get away from that in romance. So they're not, I want to say like being abusive, but some of them do come across that way. And I'm a big fan that we are getting away from that as being considered part of the alpha trait of being just a jerk. I don't like those.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think, the term that I've heard is alpha hole.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what those people are, or what those people.
That's the word I was looking for.
Those characters are. And what bothers me about that is I started reading romance when I was young. I mean, some people might argue too young, but whatever. But I was a young romance reader, and I think about girls or guys or whomever that were, the age I was when I started reading that. Well, that's when you really start forming what you think you should look for in a partner.
In a partner.
And you don't want somebody
Yes.
who is getting their, frontal lobe or whatever lobe formed and what they're looking for, to think, oh, well, if he's a complete dick, but then he comes back at the end and says he's sorry, then that's okay. Well, it's not.
But he said, I love you.
Cool.
There is a whole generation of us that are still fucked up by Twilight. I won't stand.
Girl. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that was me. That was my introduction to romance, because I read the Twilight series my senior year of high school. And then my freshman year of college is when I started reading adult romance. And I still look back on it and I'm like, I am both very thankful to Twilight for giving me that introduction to a genre that I love so much today. But at the same time, I just had this conversation with my friend who was visiting that there were so many movies and books and shows with relationships that we fangirled so hard for. Like, I was Team Edward. I was Team Ross and Rachel. I was Team Buffy and Spike. And I'm like, they were all so toxic.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
And the other side of that for me is that in a lot of these instances, not only is the relationship between the two protagonists toxic, but a big fan favorite would be to pit two women in the story against each other too. And to just kind of attack the female relationships instead of having a good group of female friends who rally around each other and support each other and giving you, a true girl gang. I think the phrase I heard was, it used to be that a romance heroine was literally like alone on an island. She didn't have this group of female friends. And if there was another lady portrayed, she was, the mean ex-wife or the terrible ex-girlfriend or the slutty girl who was trying to steal her man or whatever. And what I like, and I hope that romance is truly going in this direction, is that not only is it more of a focus on healthy relationships, i.e. communication, and not going the whole book thinking, oh, I wonder if he feels this way. I wonder if she feels that way, when it would be all solved in a conversation. So it's like encouraging people to make better choices through fiction. And it's also putting a better focus and a more positive focus on the female friendships out there, and just having people in your life other than your significant other, and that giving you a more fulsome relationship with everybody that you have, because you have other outlets than your significant other, which I think is awesome.
You should, at least.
Yeah.
Like when people say, oh, I married my best friend. No, you shouldn't. You should have a best friend and you should have your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. You shouldn't, you need more people, in my opinion.
I think probably a lot of us grew up too in that generation of, like, when I was growing up, feminism was considered a bad word for a long time. Like
a dirty word,
considered a feminist.
And it still is to certain
It's
people.
Some people. But I feel like the good thing is that it has shifted. Like, and I remember I was working at a job where I don't know how it came up, but I was like, well, of course I'm a feminist. And this other woman I was working with was like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. Like, and she like went into this rant about feminists. And then I remember, like, during certain election years, all of a sudden she was identifying as a feminist, and I think understood what that term actually means, like was displaying proudly like feminist. And I would, so I've seen that shift personally among my friends. And I think that is reflected more in books too, to your point, EF, about like female friendships. Like, I see that in almost every book I read now that's coming out.
Yeah. One of my stickers and like one of my graphics that I give away that is like hugely popular is like this pretty like rosy floral thing, but then it says romance novels are feminist as fuck. And people love it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of those things that like I really try to put into every book is that like it started like unconsciously just because like that's who I am. That's, you know, me and my friends and all of that. But I think just like focusing on women, making them have their own stories and own careers and own paths within the story is so important. And in some of the older ones, you don't get that. But also, I have noticed, and I don't really read it anymore because of this, but new adult books, like the new adult romance genre, tends to have much more or much less focus on the feminism side of it, in my opinion. And you do get more of the, you know, alpha male that is kind of toxic. And I have friends who have teenage daughters who want to get into reading romance, and they're like, give me Rex for them. You know, we're okay with them, you know, reading a little bit of spice and, you know, getting into it and stuff. And I'm like, do not read this one. Do not let her read that. Don't let her read this one, because it really puts forward this idea of relationships that I'm like, I don't want her to think that this is okay. Like, we're older, we know, but she's, you know, 17.
Yeah,
right.
I absolutely agree with that. And it's like, I think they're called bully romances. Like that's what some of those are. And you know, not to yuck anyone's yum. Everybody should be able to love what they love. And
I love the occasional one. I have to say, I don't know what it is about me. I don't know what I do to suppress the feminism in me to be able to read one of those books, but
it's the inner Twihard in you, Kelly. Always up.
I blame Edward Cullen.
That must be it.
But I feel like, though, you are at a point in your life where you know, I'm semi-reading this ironically.
And I know like, that I'm reading it, like, to me, when I think of like bully romance, billionaire romance, those are the two that I'll use for now, at least. I categorize those as like fantasy romance in my mind. Like, to me, those are up there with vampires and werewolves and witches, because there is no world that I exist in today where there are ethical, hot, young billionaires. I do not exist in a world where that is also a thing. I also don't exist in a world where I want someone to bully me and then fuck me. Like, I mean, it's those are not things that exist in reality, at least in my world. And so I'm able to recognize those as fantasy. But I agree with, you know, what Jess was saying in that this is 32-year-old Kelly that can say that. Now, if this was 17-year-old reading Twilight Kelly, I don't know if I would have that same reckoning.
You wouldn't know that guy needed a swift kick in the dick.
Exactly.
You would be like, oh, well, maybe I can change him. And
there it is.
Yes.
There it is. Right there. And
beat him into submission.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, honestly, I think that does tie in to that. What was the phrase? The idea that the hero should be emotionally defeated by the heroine is often an important aspect of alpha male characterization. I think that really is a large component of it, is that she should be able to change him and make him good, or make him more vulnerable, more sweet, you know, whatever it is, which are all genuinely traits that we often associate with more with femininity, traditional femininity, than we do with masculinity. So it really is interesting. I mean, in general, I hate gender roles. I like think of myself as like a gender abolitionist. Like, I hate these ideas that we've like prescribed to different genders based on nothing. And I think that is something that, with this huge push for more cinnamon rolls, for golden retrievers, for men who are in touch with their feelings, who are confident but not arrogant, who are confident in the way they present themselves, and they might paint their nails, they might have long hair, like whatever it might be. I think there's a push for that because people are kind of tired of what alpha heroes have become, not what they were intended to be.
Sure.
I'm also so curious what it'll like transform into, because the thing that I heard, I'm in my late 30s, so I hear gossip about 20 somethings from younger friends. But what I've heard about younger, like 20 something guys are that now they're the ones who want to settle down, get married, have kids. Like they want women who have like stable careers, all of this stuff. Whereas like my generation of men are like a little bit fucked still. Like they want to be feminists, but they also have the Twihard syndrome where they're like, but
Well, the
I
system
am,
works for them.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's
So
why change it?
why change
Oh,
it?
yeah.
But I am
Yeah.
interested what will happen when these like younger generations come up and like what romance will look like then, because it
Yeah.
feels like they're over indexing in the opposite direction.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, one thing that I remember hearing is when 50 Shades of Grey came out. Talk about a guy who needs a kick
I'm
in
just
the
so
dick. But
curious to
anyway.
hear where this goes.
So when it came out, like, you know, obviously it was this hugely popular thing. And I remember my family goes to the beach for a week every summer. And we've done that since I was a kid, and the whole family goes. And so my aunt was reading it, I was reading it, and my younger cousin was reading it. And so it was like, we're all just out there on the beach, you know, reading this stuff. And what I thought was interesting was some of the commentary, feminist commentary about it, was that it came out at a time when, you know, the economy had just fallen off a cliff and everything just seemed really bleak. And it was a point in time where women were shouldering a lot more of the load, because at that point, a lot of guys in, you know, the male patriarch of the family had been laid off, but maybe the
Right.
wife was still working or the mom was still working. And so they not only had to take on that breadwinner role, but they were also still the main caregiver to the family. So it was like they were all of a sudden both the emotional pillar and the financial pillar, and they were what was holding things up. And one of the reasons that the Christian Grey fantasy, because Kelly, I think that's a perfect way to put it. It is a fantasy. That shit ain't real. It's not going to have, Jeff Bezos ain't lighting anybody's fire. Sorry.
Oh God, no.
But you know, the fantasy aspect of that was so appealing was that somebody could come in and take some of that load off your shoulders, that you would no longer have to be crumbling under the weight of trying to support it all. And so that is what I think some of that billionaire fantasy romance comes in, because you think, oh, well, maybe there is this guy who seems like an asshole, but if I just hang in there.
See, and you know what's funny is like, I think this is a conversation. I'm very deep in like political TikTok as well. So this is like something that I hear outside of romance novel conversations as well. But I think what's interesting about what you said is that women hear that and think, yes, of course, the fantasy is to have a supportive partner.
Yeah.
Men hear that and think, women want a man to support them and not do anything themselves. And so it's wild to me in a world where today more than half of households in America have dual income. Women are working. I've seen like the statistics on wage gap. I've seen the statistics on how many hours men work versus women work. Really interesting, by the way. Men work on average 2 weeks more a year than women work, but men have 6 weeks more of leisure time than women do.
Well, yeah, so, you're not factoring in like the home labor, right?
Yep. And that's the unpaid labor at home. So I mean, it really is interesting in terms of, and I think Jess said it to piggyback off of what Erin said too, that with the younger generations coming up now, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, I think there's a lot less focus on what men and women should be, or what men should do versus what women should do than there have been for our generations. And because of that, there are people in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are flailing to try to keep up with the changes that are happening, and they're trying to fight the changes and make sure that we keep things the way they are, and the people who want to keep things the way they are generally the people who it's working for, which tend to be men. And I think, unfortunately, something that a lot of people, men, have clung to is the idea of being the alpha man in a relationship, that you are, I know we hear the term protector and provider thrown around like all the time. And I think those are great ideas. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to protect the people you love and help provide for the people that you love. But to say that it's, you know, like something that you're born having to do or knowing to do, is wild to me.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the other side of that is, and I don't mean to monopolize the conversation, but I have strong feelings. But I think, you know, the protector role, I mean, let's not forget about the mama bears out there. I mean, you want to talk about somebody that is going to protect somebody, you get in between a mama and her kid, she will light you up. And so, you know, I think these roles, it's like you said, Kelly, they shouldn't be gender specific. The entire unit, and Jess, I think you can probably speak to this with your paranormal romance and the pack idea. The entire unit has that protective instinct because you want to protect what's yours, and you see that pack, your own pack, as yours. And so that shouldn't be limited to, you know, the male protagonist. That's a role that anybody can play.
Yes, that's very true. One of the things that is in all of my novels in the paranormal series is that, you know, there are alpha females as well, obviously. And, you know, their struggle is they may go head to head with their alpha male counterpart, but they're also fighting for their pack. And, you know, get between them and, you know, their sister, their brother, their BFF, and there's going to be hell to pay, just like there would if, you know, it was the male in that situation. So, you know, she's holding her own and doing her thing. And actually probably the most fun I've had writing a book is when I wrote my male wolf shifter romance, because I got to do two alpha males going head to head and, you know, trying to navigate that road of like, okay, but like one is the alpha of the pack and the other's his mate. So what is he? Like, he's not the queen of the pack, but he's a leader.
Yeah.
And, you know, they decided in their book, in their pack, that they're co-leaders, and, you know, they make decisions together and do it together, and that works for them. But, you know, I have this other idea that I'm working on where the other one is maybe not going to be quite so dominant, even though he is an alpha. And, you know, he's going to be like, it's your pack, dude. Do what you want. And like, I'm going to be over here doing my own thing. And that's why I love male romance. It's like, you can write them either way, really. And
I think that made me, what you said though, made me like two things like clicked in my head. One was that I think too often alpha heroes are unable to compromise. Like that's like kind of one of their traits as well, is like they will not compromise, whether it's compromising on their beliefs, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but not willing to compromise with their partner. And I think that ties into the second thing that you made me think of when you said that you wrote two alpha heroes who, you know, can coexist and be co-leaders together. I think generally when we use the term alpha, we also like subconsciously think about that if there's an alpha, there has to be a beta, that if somebody is in charge, somebody needs to be subservient to them. And when you talk about having an alpha hero, I think because we use that word with hero, we don't necessarily say alpha hero, beta heroine, but I think the implication is there that if he's the alpha, she is beneath him. She is subservient to him in some way or another.
The thing that hit me with is that how often do you see when it's typed, it's a capital H for the hero and a lowercase h for the heroine?
Oh, I haven't noticed that now.
I hate
you will
it.
never
It drives
not
me
see
insane.
it now, Erin. Now that you've heard
Yes.
it, you will never
Capital H,
not
lowercase
miss
h.
it.
I'm very worried. Yeah, well, because
Yeah.
when you were talking, like, I feel like my first book, For Better or Worse, Nina is definitely an alpha heroine. Like, she is the dominant person. She has all of the characteristics that we talked about. Like, she's very confident, and for sure, like, Leo is the beta in that relationship. But I do remember getting feedback from some readers where they were like, I just couldn't relate to Nina. Like, she's too aggressive or too assertive. And I remember
unlikable.
thinking, like, oh man, like, that's so interesting that
Mhm.
some of these like readers are commenting with that, because
Yeah.
I
you
want
know,
to
Unlikable heroines.
Yeah,
Right,
I want to refer everybody watching live or listening back to our previous Tit Talk discussion about the unlikable heroine and why
Yep.
we call her unlikable. It is actually probably one of my favorite discussions we have ever had on the podcast, and it really touches you deep inside in some places that you might feel uncomfortable with, but probably need to examine. So,
Yes.
I think anytime we do apply the term alpha to a heroine, which we hardly ever do, but when we do, it is generally seen in a negative light. And that
Yeah.
is to go back to the unlikable heroine discussion we did have. It is usually because we have been taught to dislike masculine traits when they are applied to women.
Yeah.
I
Men
had
are the boss, women are bossy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, there
exactly.
you go.
My second book, Earning It, has a very aggressive heroine. She is a boss in her work world. She's sexually aggressive and she takes no shit. And that is consistently the most divisive book that I have seen.
Sure.
They tell you not to read reviews, but can't help myself sometimes. But and the majority of the negativity is not against the hero, it's against her.
Yep.
And
been there. Heard that feedback on my book.
And I'm just like, she's, if she were a man, it's like, Taylor Swift just re-released 1989. It's like the song from Lover, If I Were a Man, I can't remember the name of it. But she talks about how if I were a guy, I would essentially be considered this baller. I would be applauded and people would celebrate me. But because I'm a lady person, it's not the same. And that's BS of the highest order.
And this is the part, to bring it all together, this is the part where, as feminist as fuck romance is, Jess, I will say, because the majority of people who read romance and write romance for that matter are women or women identifying, this is the part that really bothers me, because the people who are writing those reviews, who are calling these people unlikable, who are recognizing how sexy the alpha hero is, but when it's a woman, she's a bitch, she's unlikable. These are women. These are women who are, this is coming from such a place of like internalizing misogyny of what women are meant to be and what men are meant to be as dictated by men. And so because of that, it becomes how you judge other women, even as a woman. And that is the one thing about the wonderful world of romance that I do think we still very much need to work on. And, it's happening because we're seeing so many things challenged just in our everyday culture. It's no wonder that we're seeing that find its way into the books that people are writing and reading as well. And I think that is one of the large reasons why we are not seeing a push for alpha heroes right now. We are seeing readers craving men who know what they want and aren't jerks about it, who have feelings and aren't afraid to express them. We are seeing less third act breakups than ever before in romance novels. And I, for one, am loving it. Because
I remember you talking about that, Kelly, the third act breakup.
I'm loving it. You know what? And I just published my book and I don't have a third act breakup. And as I was writing
Plot Twist also doesn't have a third act breakup.
Yes, I don't do any.
And I was thinking about how to do it as I was writing it. And I was like, why am I trying to make this happen just for the sake of it happening, as opposed to letting the characters have their journey, you know? And so we're seeing a lot less of that as well. And that's not to say that there can't still be third act breakups, because I do think that they still work, you know, for depending on the story and the characters. But more than anything, I think where romance is going is kind of challenging convention. And alpha heroes are part of that. I think they've been a major part of the convention of romance for a long time. And people are saying, why? Like, why if they don't need to be? Why? You know, and I love it. I love people questioning everything.
Same.
And I was very, you know, when I first heard the term cinnamon roll, I was like, well, that doesn't sound like something I want to do. You know, that sounds weird. I don't get that. But then I read a cinnamon roll and I was like, well, hell yeah. It's got kind of, you know, the hard or, you know, crispy outer layer.
But
and then you get down into the good gooey center where like the icing's drip down in there. I'm into it.
So much dripping. So many things dripping.
I had not heard that term though, cinnamon roll, until 2021 when my first book came out.
Yeah.
And it had been reviewed and someone referred to Leo as a cinnamon roll hero. And I was like,
he is.
What is that? And I had to Google it. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that's what I wrote. And I didn't realize that that was what these characters are that I've been reading.
Yes. Erin writes delicious cinnamon roll heroes.
Yes.
Yeah. My new book has like a pottery boy. So he's very good.
I love it.
I love it. Well, any final thoughts on the alpha men, where they might be going, what we might hope for them in the future? Like, do we want them to stick around? Do we want to see more alpha heroes?
I would like to see like different versions of them. Like we mentioned, there are no like short king alphas. Like it would be cool to see like different versions of alphas pop up and see what that looks like. I would read that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I think they're gonna have to keep changing with the times. And I think you know, you're gonna get more of the alphas that, you know, like I was saying earlier, they used to be jerks. They used to just be the alpha holes. And now we're getting away from that. I think they're gonna continue moving in that direction of like they can be strong and supportive and be alpha.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my hope too, Jess, is that, you know, we keep the alpha, but he's somebody that we don't want to change. We keep the alpha, but we eliminate the emotional defeat because he's already emotionally secure.
Yeah.
You know, I have a coaster that says, girl, unless he wears a diaper, you can't change him. And I think that is just epic advice for everybody. Only cost me $4.99. I mean, just
money well spent.
And it's something to keep in mind because you want a man who is confident and secure. And you can't have a man that is confident and secure unless he is in control of his own emotions and understands how to use them. And so that's what I hope for alphas.
What I would like more than anything is I'm just tired of the term alpha. I think it's something that we keep around because people have an instant like recognition for what it is. But even in this discussion, we've talked about how much it's changed. And so I think because of that, I would like to see us do a rebrand of alpha heroes. And I'm going to propose Confident King. That's what I
like it.
I was like, Kelly, my first thought was like non-baby man. I was like, what would you
I feel like Confident King might be easier to market.
CK.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I do think, because I don't think there's anything wrong with confidence. I think confidence is really sexy. I think that's something that a lot of not just women, but just anybody finds really sexy, is a confidence in yourself and what you're doing and who you are and what you want. And I think if that's what people were advertising, I would have no problem picking it up. It's the other things that generally come along with alpha hero that turn me personally off. And I think it does for a lot of people as well. So I would like to rebrand the alpha hero. So that's my proposal. The world can take it or not, but confident kings in 2024.
I'm here for it.
I would read, and hopefully I will write.
You should make some stickers, Kelly.
Okay,
Yeah.
confident king for 2024. It's the political platform I'm running on.
Yes, yes.
Well, last thing, ladies, would all of you mind telling everybody where they can find and follow you? And of course, I will be sure to drop some links in the show notes when the podcast episode comes out. And I'll just throw it over to EF first so we're not all talking over each other.
Sure. I am mainly on Instagram at 𝑒_F_Dodd. I'm also on Facebook, but only because I have it set up so my Instagram posts also load on Facebook, because
Perfect.
that's the height of my technical expertise. And that is mainly where I'm most active. I also have a website, EF Dodd Writes. And that links to a lot of other articles, opinion pieces, and things like that I have done. So if my opinions today haven't terrified you and you're interested in more, you can head on over there and check them out. And again, Almost Perfect releases on November 1st. And for
Perfect.
the lady who one-starred me because it had too much sex in it, I refuse to apologize.
You know, those people are just giving free advertising. Like, I
tell
don't
you what.
think
Yeah.
what they're doing is what they're doing.
It's like a Princess Bride. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Exactly. I see a 1-star with the label "too much sex," and that's an instant download
One
for
Add
me.
to cart.
Perfect. All right, and over to Jess.
Okay, you can find me online pretty much every social media site that's ever been invented, because I'm always trying them out and seeing what's going on. I am Jess Bryant Books on pretty much all of them except for Instagram, because I was hacked last year. So I'm Jess Bryant all through there. Everything else is Jess Bryant Books. My website is jessbryantbooks.com. And all of my books are available on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you get a free copy of Call Me Irresistible, which is my first small town romance and has no third act breakup because he's a total confident king.
Yay! Well done. See, it's catching on already. I love it. Over to Erin. And I know, Erin, your next book, Plot Twist, it's out also in November, right?
Yeah, November 14th, Plot Twist comes out. And you can find me at Erin La Rosa Lit on Instagram and on TikTok at Erin La Rosa Writes. Those are my two places. But I have so enjoyed chatting with everyone. This was so fun.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Yay. Awesome. Well,
So much
thank you
fun.
all. Thank you especially to EF Dodd for proposing this idea. I'm so glad that this was your suggestion and that we rounded up this batch of hotties to talk about it.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for participating in the Romance for Reproductive Rights auction.
Yes.
That is key right now. Any help we can get in that region is very much appreciated.
Yes, absolutely. All the more reason to vote in 2024, along with voting for confident kings.
Yes.
I think you could apply that to politics too.
I agree. Bumper stickers should be made immediately.
Yep, exactly. So, well, thank you all. And thanks to everybody listening to the playback on the podcast. And stay tuned because the 12 Days of Boobsmas are coming up soon. It's my favorite time of year. And we've got a lot of holiday romance coming your way in December. So get ready for that. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and end the